Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar on moving to France and buying a French property. My name's Karen Tate, I'm a freelance journalist and I'll be your host for the next hour. For the past 20 years or so, I've been editing French property news and I also contribute to titles such as the Sunday Times in the UK. I'm joined today by our panel of experts who between them can answer pretty much all your questions. Thanks to those of you who've already submitted questions, but if you have one during the webinar, you'll find a box to the right of your screen. So before we get to those questions, I shall just pass over to our panelists to introduce themselves. So firstly, Joanna.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Joanna Leggett, so I'm one of the family members of LEGGETT IMMOBILIER. We started 22 years ago in a small little village in the Dordogne, and we've now expanded and cover the whole of France. So wherever you're looking, we should be hopefully able to help you. We offer a hand-holding service and we have an in-house contracts team and a sales support team that can help you along the way. Back to you, Karen.
Thanks, Joanna. And Tracy?
Hi everybody, yes, my name is Tracy Lunetti. I've lived in France for over 30 years now, and my business LBS was set up 15 years ago to help people like yourselves who want to move, live, or have a business in France. And it's our job at LBS to really help you through all the paperwork footsteps of moving to France, be that visas, healthcare, driving licenses, car registrations, and of course the business creation as well. So any of the paperwork processes, that's what we do. Look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks, Tracy, and over to Sharon.
Hi everybody, I'm Sharon Revel. I'm a French mortgage broker at CAFP. I look after the international team here, and I've been arranging mortgages for expats and non-residents for the last 22 years. Hopefully we'll be able to answer some of your questions, but if anything remains unanswered, feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Sharon. And over now to Helen, not Paulette, as it says on the screen. Apologies for that.
Thanks, Karen. I'm standing in for Paulette today. I work with Paulette at the Agence AXA International insurance agent in France. We can work with the whole of France and we can help you with all of your insurance, banking needs and questions.
Thanks, Helen. And Jake?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Jake Barber. I'm the owner of SJB Global. So we're an international financial advisory firm specialising in cross-border advice. Our main focus is Americans and UK expats. So helping with things like retirement planning, structuring your assets in the most tax efficient way, both whilst you're alive and on death, and just really making sure you get the most out of your money. So looking forward to running through your questions today.
Thanks, Jake. And over to Joseph.
Thank you very much, Karen. So I'm Joseph and I'm one of the senior traders here at Lumon Pay. What we do is a little bit simpler than what some of the other people on the panel here do. We're just here to help you with the currency conversion and the international transfer. And we've been working with LEGGETT for coming up to 15 years now, when we've been around for 25 years. So we certainly know our way around the French system. Just whilst I've got you at this point, we like to involve the audience a bit more, just to sort of get an idea as to when you do look to plan to start looking at property over in France, just so we can get a bit more of an idea of your plans and help with that. So I'm just going to run a poll here. There's a few questions coming through very quickly. The first one is, when do you plan on starting to look at property in France? Very important, because everyone's at different stages and there are a number of different options available. So that one is now launched with a few very easy answers there. And then secondly, we have, bear with me, oh, there's lots of answers coming in very quickly. That's good. Okay, most of you have voted there, so I'm going to close that one and run to the next one so I don't leave it too long. The second one is, within what time period are you financially in a position to put forward an offer? Very important. part of this process, because although the buying process in France is always the same, it differs from region to region depending on where you are, and we're seeing more and more customers coming in from the US these days as well, and there are lots of nuances within the banking system. So another very useful bit of information for everyone. Seems like everyone's hot on the trigger this time, so I'm just closing off that poll now. And then the final one, before I bore you all to death, this one is, where are you joining us from today? As I mentioned, there are many different ways that this can happen depending on which region you're in. So I've just launched that one, and from our side, we'll be able to guide you no matter where you are, because we've been doing this for a long time and we know exactly what we're doing. There we go. Thank you very much, Karen. Back over to you.
Thanks, Joseph. So let's get started on the questions. We have one for Joanna here from Christy Hull, who asks, given that there's no master listing service in France, unlike in the USA, must I search and contact each individual realtor or estate agent?
Yeah, there isn't the sort of MLS thing that they have in the USA. They do have that kind of thing in certain regions. But with Leggett, with us, we have a sales support centre, and we can also do for you what's known as a mandat de recherche, which means that you can speak to one of our sales support team. They'll be your one point of contact. You can give them the criteria of exactly what you're looking for and in what area, and they will go and make the search for you. Hopefully the properties we will already have them. But if we don't, we can also go to other agencies and do an intercabinet contract with them on your behalf. So that is something that we can do for you. Then what we would do then is send all of the shortlisted properties that we've put together for you. You would choose the ones that you would like to go and see, and then we would set up all of the appointments and the itinerary for you, because France is obviously huge, and a lot of people misjudge the distances between different areas. So we would put all that together because we could tell the time, we could tell the properties, etc. So it really is a hand-holding service. We will do the search for you. But do look on our website, because there are thousands of properties on there anyway.
Lovely, thanks, Joanna. And Christy, I think you'll find, in France that it's very much an agent-led process. And once you're in touch with your agent, they will be very active helping you find what you want. So good luck with that. So on to a visas question. We always get lots of visas questions, and this one is for Tracy from Kim Neerman Smith, who says, can you change your visa purposes each year you apply? For example, initially you have a long stay visa for the first year in France, but then you want to change to an entrepreneur visa, a working visa, the next year. Is this possible?
So hi, Kim. It's not possible every year. That was the first thing I heard was, is this possible? No. It is possible to modify your visa. So if you come on a visitor's visa, non-working, you want to then work, you have a project, then there is a possibility to modify that once you're in France. However, a word of advice is you would not modify a visitor's visa or a non-working visa in the first year. So when you come in on a visitor's visa, you sign a declaration saying you will not work in France. If you try and modify that until after a renewal, it will be rejected. It absolutely will be rejected. No matter what you read on the internet and social media, you cannot modify until you've renewed at least once. So let's say you come in the first year, a lot of people who've got a JIT activity, they're not ready to set the business up, they want to run it first. So they might come on a visitor's visa for a year, 18 months. So they'll renew the visa after the first year. Once they're into the second year and have their residency card, then they will modify to an entrepreneur visa, because their activity is now able to receive gas and is more of a business activity. So then you can apply to modify from a visitor's visa to an entrepreneur visa via local prefecture. Of course, the criteria will still be the same, as in you have to provide a valid business and financial plan and show that you will meet at least the minimum requirements, and that will be obviously have to be renewed usually every 2 years. An entrepreneur So yes, it can be modified, but not in the first year. And it's not something you would do often because it's a very arduous process.
Lovely, thanks for answering that, Tracy. So we have a healthcare question now for Helen. It's from Mary McNulty, who says, how do I join the French healthcare system, or what way do people access medical care on relocation? And she's an Irish citizen. And a similar question from Kim Neyman Smith. After receiving your long stay visa or resident permit, are you able to use the French healthcare system?
It's quite a big question. Two big questions. Thanks very much. Yeah, the short answer is yes, everybody can access the French system. It's how we do that and how you do that and when. So when you're arriving in France, everybody is obliged to have a health insurance in place, whether that complies with the requirements for a visa if you need one, or whether that's just to support your application if you don't need a visa. So if you're from another EU nation or such like. You can then, once you arrive in France, there's a few different categories. If you are working, then you can apply straight to the French system. So if you have the entrepreneur visa that Tracy was just discussing, if you are retired and from an EU citizen, there are ways of accessing the system very quickly. But for most people, you will be here under the provision of PUMA, which means you need to wait 3 months before you can apply for a social security number. And it's quite a good idea, I think, to get some advice about how you do that and the best way to proceed from somebody who's really experienced in that area. In the interim, and even with your insurance and everything, there's nothing to stop you accessing doctors and to seeing a doctor, but you will need to pay up front, and how you have that refunded, if at all, will be down to the type of insurance you have. It's a short answer. We could go on, but I think I don't want to fill the whole webinar with all of the details applying for the French system. It's
that's great, Helen.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, so now we've got a quick question. Don't know if it'll be a quick answer about mortgages. Are mortgages available for non-residents? That's from Lisa Victor for Sharon.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Yeah, it's a quick question. I can't really give a quick answer. Yes, I can. Yes, they are available. Yes, you can get a mortgage as a non-resident. So that's a quick answer. After how much you can get, which I'm sure is also what you would like to know, depends on your situation. It depends where you live. It depends on what your employment or your income situation is. And it also depends what you want to buy, whether it's a residential property, a commercial property, a new build property, etc., whether it's in the middle of the countryside, in a big city. Everything is different based on your individual situation. So yes, non-residents can get mortgages. We arrange mortgages for people in the US, in Canada, in Britain. Despite Brexit, we can still finance people who are resident in the UK, in Europe, in Singapore, in Dubai. We will look closely at where you live, but most people as a non-resident can get a mortgage, providing they meet the French lending criteria. So I will stop there because otherwise I will go on forever. If you do have any questions with regards to mortgages, feel free to get in contact, because I will say every time I do answer a question, it really depends on your individual circumstances. Thanks, Karen.
Lovely, thanks, Sharon. Okay, so a question for Jake now. It's from David Spare and it's about taxes. He says he's just looking to get an idea of what it costs to live once you buy a home in France. So how much are property and local taxes? And Matthew Sanders also wants to know how much annual property taxes will be.
Okay, so the first tax, my French accent, but taxe foncière, which is property ownership tax. So this is paid by the owner regardless of occupancy, and it's based on the rental value of the property, which is set by the local authorities. It can vary quite a lot, so depending on the type of property, the location, etc. The typical tax ranges between 0.2 to 1.5%, and it's based on the cadastral value, which is a government assessed value, often below market value. So as an example, this could range from between 500 to 3,000 euros per year. So the lower part of that would be rural areas, and then the higher part would be city and tourist areas, so places like Paris and Nice. And in most cases, this includes waste tax as well. There is potentially another tax, which is occupancy tax, so taxe de habitation. Probably not a good pronunciation. I live in Spain, so I'm probably doing the Spanish accent there. But this used to apply for all residents. It's now largely abolished for main homes as of 2023, but can still apply for second homes or vacant properties. And the typical range for this is between 400 to 2,000 euros per year. Can go up significantly in high demand cities. Other taxes to think about is just your standard ones such as electricity, water and heating. And then for real estate taxes, it can vary depending on whether it's a new property or not. I think the best one there would be to speak to Joanna Leggett, as it's the area that she specialises in.
As in property buying taxes that are paid via the notaires fees, I presume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're generally, I mean, Joanna, they're generally the notaires fees, which include like taxes, the equivalent to the French, to the UK stamp duty, is generally around about 7 to 8% of the value of the property, isn't it, for the notaires fees and the taxes?
Yeah, the notaires fee is the only, you'd pay when you're buying a property, you'd have the house, obviously you pay the price of the house. That will either include the agent's fees or the buyer pays the agent's fees. At the end of the day, you're going to be paying the same price, whoever's paying it. And then on top of that, you'll have the notaires fee, and the notaires fees can range between sort of roughly around about 7 to 9% maximum on the price of the house. And those are all the fees that you'd have to pay on the day. Sometimes as Jake was explaining about taxe foncière, you might have to pay pro rata. So say, for example, you completed in June, there'd still be 6 months worth of taxe foncière. And so you may be expected to pay that 6 months worth of taxe foncière. On the tax habitation, it's whoever's in the house on the 1st of January that has to pay that charge for the whole year. But as Jake said, if it's a permanent residence now, there is no tax habitation. It's only for second homes or holiday homes as such.
Thanks, Joanna. And I think it's true, isn't it, that when estate agents are showing you around a property, they usually can tell you what the taxe foncière will be for the next year or that year. So they'll be able to give you a good idea.
Yeah, sometimes it's advertised with the taxe foncière and the tax habitation, but sometimes the properties have changed, or it might be an inheritance and they don't know what it is, or et cetera, et cetera. So, but we would always find out for you before you sign anything. So that would be fine. And as you say, the notaires fees include stamp duty and all other land taxes that go to the government. It's actually only about 20% of the notary fee that actually goes to the notary. The rest is government taxes of that 7%.
Lovely. Thanks, Joanna. So this is a currency question for Joseph now. This question says, we're financing our French property purchase with a mortgage. How can we best make regular transfers from the UK to France to pay the mortgage? So monthly payments, presumably.
With our system, we cater to all different types of clients. Some will prefer to do that over the phone on a monthly basis and call in and have their relationship with their broker and simply purchase a set amount each month and send it off to France. We can ensure the funds are there on that same day. We also have a portal where you can log in and do that yourself. You could have a regular payment plan where you've got a direct debit coming into your Lumon account, and on that same day the currency is converted and transferred to France. And then with others, they might be a bit more hands-on and ask us to reach out if the rate moves favourably, so they could do a bulk amount to top up that French account so the money is there when the mortgage comes. And a nice little tidbit here for our listeners that are doing this. Overdraft penalties are a lot more serious in France than they are here in the UK, I gather, from some clients that have not been so punctual with their payments, I hear. So my advice would be to make sure the money is there on time, and we can certainly get a quick turnaround if ever you are in a rush. Thank you.
That's a great bit of extra advice. Yes, it's going into debt is very frowned upon in France, even just a small bit into your overdraft. So, okay, another buying question for Joanna now from Justin Toach. He says, what are the fees for buying a house in France? We've kind of covered that. You may want to go into more detail. And how long does the process take once you have an offer accepted? And Craig Hammond says he would like to have some more knowledge on the process in general. And again, he was asking about fees and payments, which we've kind of covered. And there's the deposit too, of course.
Okay, with regards to agency fees, we work with the FNAM, which is like the Governing Board of Estate Agents. It's like an ABTA in travel agency. So all agents' fees are set, and we have what's called a barem. So that's the different levels depending on the price of the house, and they have to be advertised in every shop window that we have, and also on our website. So you'll always be clear about what the agent's fees are. Any member of the FNAM would have to show those fees as well. So that just covers the agency fee part. When it comes to the buying process, it's very straightforward in France, and it's very safe for the buyer. You can't get gazumped. That doesn't happen in France at all. So basically what would happen is you would make an offer on a property. It would be negotiated with the vendor on your behalf, and once all parties have agreed, then the searches would be done. These are tests which are done. Well, they don't do surveys in France like we do in the UK, or when I was in the UK. So they have diagnostic tests. So they do electric, termites, lead, electricity, septic tank searches to make sure that there isn't any problems. Most of those are just to highlight the areas where there might be an issue, like something, particularly in fact, you might not have an earth on an electricity plug or something like that. If there's termites, you don't have to, go through the sale. You can pull out from the sale, but there's very, very few houses now that we come across with termites, and of course they can be treated. So all of those tests would be done. Then the compromis de vente, which is the exchange of contracts, would be drawn up, and then the buyer would sign first, and then the vendor would sign. Once the vendor has signed, they can't pull out of the sale. The buyer still has 10 days cooling off period. So you have another 10 days to cool off, and in case you decided you changed your mind or you bought it in haste or whatever. It doesn't usually happen, to be fair. And then after that 10 days, you need to send a 10% deposit to the notary. So the notary that will be handling the sale has a client's holding account, and you send that 10% to the notary. Now you can put suspensive clauses into that first exchange of contracts. So say, for example, you were getting a mortgage, you would put in which bank you've applied for. So say Sharon would give us all of that information if you were going through Sharon, which bank it is and which interest rate it is. If that mortgage was refused before completion, I think you get normally around about 45 days, sometimes more. You just need to send the the refusal to the notary, and you can withdraw from the sale and receive your 10% deposit back. The same with if you wanted to change, say, a barn into habitation for a guest house or something, we can put in for outline planning. So it would be called a CU, Certificate of Urbanisation. And if that was refused and it was a suspensive clause of the sale, again, you can pull out from the sale and receive your 10% back. Swimming pools is another one that a lot of people put in. They want to put a pool in, and it's really important to them. So that is a suspensive clause. And if it's refused, very rarely are they refused unless they're next to a very historical building or church. So do bear that in mind. So again, you could pull out. But if all of the suspensive clauses are met, it usually takes probably 3 months from start to finish. It can take more, particularly if we're waiting for planning or whatever, but it's usually around about 3 to 4 months for the sale to complete. If after all the suspensive clauses are met and you just want to pull out, you are at risk of losing your deposit and certainly some of the fees for the works that would have been done on your behalf. So the only way you can pull out after is if one of the suspensive clauses isn't met. But it's very, very straightforward. The vendor can't pull out at all, so you're totally safe. I know in certain countries you can exchange and complete on the same day, so you're always sort of like, oh my goodness, is it going to complete and is it going to exchange, etc. But in France, you're very sure of it sort of 3 months in advance. So it's a very safe system for buying.
Which is always a good thing to hear. I wish we had a similar process in the UK. I think a lot of people would like that. Anyway, moving on to one for Tracy now from Gary Norman, who asks, can I can I successfully relocate to France from the UK now I'm retired? Do I still need proof of income from employment?
Interesting question, yes. Okay, so of course, absolutely, if you're retired in the UK or even just, you want to retire early, you can come to live in France. You don't have to work in France. You can come across on what's called a long stay visitors visa, and that allows you to move to France permanently. It's a visa that gets you in France, and then there's a validation process once you are in France, which triggers the immigration procedure to allow you to stay, and then it gets renewed every year. What intrigues me on the question was the latter part of what you said. You need to have proof of employment or proof of employment salary, I think it said. So the retirement is obviously you're not working. You don't want to be proving any salary coming in, because that is not in alignment with moving to France to retire. So what you would need to show is either your pension or your retirement revenue coming in. If you don't have retirement revenue because you're an early retiree, then you just have to show sufficient funds to not be a burden on the French society. So it would be maybe, it could be private investment income, it could be savings, it could be a combination of both. And you will always have to show 3 months bank statements either way. But no, salary is not something, or employment is not something you would show if you're retiring to France. And we have successfully helped thousands of people move to France, retirees and not. So absolutely it's possible, and hope we can help you with that in any way.
So great news. Yes, you can retire to France, but you do need to provide proof of income, just not from employment.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Let's what do we got now? We have a question for Helen. It's from Phil Gibson, who says, I want to set up a doctor relationship immediately on arrival to my new address in France. How is this best accomplished? So how is it best to register with a doctor, I guess, straight away?
Yeah, it's an understandable concern, and I think people's healthcare and the transition from one country to another is something that people are very concerned about. It follows on a little bit from the previous question, which is, once you're in France, French healthcare is generally, although there are exceptions, not free at point of access, which means when you see a general doctor, you pay for that appointment. So in theory, there's nothing to stop anybody finding and registering and seeing a doctor. In practice, I think there's a few things for people to think about. So think about the area you're moving to. Very rural areas may have less provision of doctors. France has got a really good health system. I really have good things to say about it, but that doesn't mean there are no issues at all. And in some areas, there may be more difficulty in finding doctors than others. So, if you're in a bigger town and a bigger city, that's going to be easier. If you find a doctor by recommendation or locality or whatever, and they're happy to accept you, then that's all good and that's all great. And you can continue to see them and you can pay for their services. Actually being fully registered probably won't happen until you get your social security number and everything slots into place.
And that's when you can join the health system.
Yeah, sorry, I could see Tracy kind of popping in as well.
I just want to mention something that's really important on this GP side of things, and I'm sure you will agree with me. One thing to bear in mind, because some people, you can go and see a GP without registering. You can pop in, you can pay if they'll see you, and you don't have to register. However, if you don't register with a GP officially, you only get reimbursed 30% of the fee and not 70%. So it is important to finally register with a GP.
And that, yeah, no, it's like, as you say, that's really, really important to know. And that's once you have your French social security number. And until that point, the doctor may accept you and you can see them and you can pay, but it's not going to be fully kind of streamlined and in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're in effect paying to see the doctor. You're not in the system at that point. And once you've got your social security number, you enter the system, register properly to make sure you get your reimbursements.
Yeah.
Great, lovely. Thank you very much. Question now for Sharon about mortgages. What's the minimum deposit I need to pay if I'm using a mortgage to buy a property? So the minimum deposit on the property, on the mortgage.
Okay, the minimum deposit, let's call it down payment, maybe
Yes.
towards the purchase. Again, it's going to depend on where you buy and your situation, because there are differences. It can generally range 15%, which is quite rare. Generally, the market at the moment is leaning more to 20 to 30% of the property purchase price. So that's of the property purchase price excluding all fees. So all of the notary fees, lenders arrangement fees, broker fees, and estate agency fees if they are at the buyer's charge. So the banks will only lend on the net property price, and that also excludes furniture. If you buy a property and there is furniture being sold with the property on the purchase contract, you will have a breakdown between the property price and the furniture price. We can't include the furniture in the mortgage either. So that's something to be aware of if you're buying a fully furnished property, for example. Estate agency fees are another thing to be aware of, because they're not at the seller's charge, sorry, frais vendeur, then you will have to pay them on top of your down payment. So generally it's between 15 and 30%. Some lenders will ask for as much as 50%. The more down payment you can put down, the more options you will have on the market. But again, it's going to be based on your location, which country you are fiscally resident in, and also what and where you are buying.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, Sharon. And yes, down payment made much more sense of that, because of course you have to pay the deposit to the notaire when you're buying a property, which is normally around 10% of the property price, which is different to the down payment. Lovely. Okay. Thank you. So another one for Jake now. Graham Lowe says, I am relocating from Switzerland to France as a UK national. From a tax perspective, would it be better to relocate from the UK? So relocating from Switzerland to France, they're a UK national, but would it be better to relocate from the UK?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's really two elements to this. One is whilst you're in Switzerland, and the other is whilst you're going to be in France. And if adding the UK in there makes any sense. So I don't know what assets we're discussing here, but I think the only ones really where you're going to be able to reduce the tax rate is unrealised capital gains and also Swiss pensions. So if you look at, for example, the comparison of Switzerland versus the UK for capital gains, and this is on securities, not properties, so things like funds, ETFs, stocks, the UK has a basic tax rate of 18%, and the higher tax rate is 24%. Whereas in Switzerland, you typically pay 0% unless you're a professional trader. So in that circumstance, you would want to make sure that you realise the gains whilst you were in Switzerland before going to the UK or France. But you'd definitely be better off doing it whilst you're in Switzerland than in the UK. But you want to make sure that's done whilst you're a tax resident in Switzerland, because if you move to France, for example, then you bring those unrealised gains across to France. And in France, it could be as high as 30% if you're paying social charges as well. So really, you'd want to make sure you do that correctly. The second part would be, which probably is the most common for people leaving Switzerland, and we've had a lot of clients that within the company that live in France, work in Switzerland, but even though they're living in France and work in Switzerland, they're building up occupational or private pension schemes in Switzerland, which when you leave the country, you can actually cash in. And what they apply is a withholding tax of between 2 to 10%. And definitely you want to do this whilst in Switzerland, because additional taxes would apply both in the UK and France. You can actually move those pensions around into a different canton before going. You want to make sure that you meet the residency test though, because let's just say you did that today, and then you moved to France and you spent more than 6 months in France in that given tax year, you may end up being a tax resident in France, even though you took it out whilst you're in Switzerland. So you definitely want to make sure you do it at the correct time. I think the most important thing after that, though, is taxes in France. So us as a company, we focus on expats. Expats tend to move around quite a lot. So what we do is we make sure we put your assets in a tax neutral jurisdiction. So if you just take, for example, one of the most common products that people use in France, which is an Assurance V, we actually set that up in a country outside of France. So you're from the UK, for example. It means if you do go back to the UK, you haven't got to sell the product and go into something else. We can convert that product into something that works in the UK as well. And the benefit with an Assurance V is the sooner you set it up, the sooner the benefits from the tax breaks begin, because if you've had it for longer than 8 years, you pay less tax when you take money from the policy. It is a really good policy for all nationalities. It doesn't really work for Americans because you can generally only buy what's called European domicile funds, which Americans get penalised for. But I think the best thing for you is to speak to one of our team, because it's not just about tax. It's also about what you're planning to do. Imagine you move to the UK to save 5% in taxes, but you've actually spent months and months of time to do that. It may not be the best thing moving forwards. You also have to bear in mind something called anti-tax avoidance. So certain countries apply certain time limits on being in that country, otherwise they tax you anyway. So if you take the UK as an example, if you move to, and this is a common one, I'm going to move to a country where I pay no tax for 1 year and move back, you actually get hit with the tax anyway. So there's a lot of parts to it, but cross-border is the area we specialise in, so it would require probably more of a deeper conversation to break down which of those areas actually apply to you.
Lovely, thanks Jake, and I think that highlights the importance of seeking professional advice across the board for all these matters. Okay, let's move on to a currency question for Joseph. It says, we're really nervous about transferring the final amount to the notaire for the purchase of our holiday home in Brittany in a month's time. How can we make sure it's a safe transaction? So that's understandable. It's a big amount of money. People are nervous. How do they make it safe?
So interestingly, they've asked about the final transaction, because at this point they would most likely have already paid the initial 10% deposit. So thanks to Joanna for explaining that really clearly for our listeners earlier, because let's just break this down into the transfers you would make. And let's say you were based in the UK. The first payment would be from your UK bank into the Lumon Sterling account. I often encourage clients to just make a single payment of £1 or £10 initially, just for their peace of mind, so you can get confirmation it's arrived and view that within your portal. You will then feel very comfortable sending the larger sums to us. So that would be the first step. Once we've converted the sterling into euros and we're then making a payment to the notaire, you can set that up yourself via the portal, which would validate the bank details to see if it was a correct account. What you can also do, and what clients tend to do when sending an international payment, is we will verbally check the bank details with you over the phone. We will do a validation from our own internal system. And at that point, we can see if we paid this notaire before or if it's a new notaire. And then for the final transfer, it won't go to the French notaire until the client has accepted a payment confirmation link themselves. And you could always do the test transfer of, say, €50 to the notaire before sending the substantial sum. So every client is different, and we cater to all different levels of comfortability with the bank system and attitude to risk, etc. And the test payments are becoming more and more common these days. And you probably all sent a payment to a friend and maybe made a silly note in the reference as a bit of a joke. My dad did that to me, called me Big Nose. It's not very nice. But when you send the payment to the notaire, you would put your name as a reference, or even a particular reference the notaire has requested. So as soon as the payment has arrived, they know it's you, and you get a proof of transfer from us. And we've got people on the ground in France that can always liaise with the notaire on your behalf as well. So hopefully that has put this person's mind at rest. We certainly know our way around this system.
Lovely, thanks Joseph. And obviously people are making payments day in, day out securely. Yep. So okay, let's have a question now for Joanna. Oh, this is a great question from Vivian Lynch, she says, I don't care how tiny the home is, but I would love a stone cottage with even a tiny garden, all for under £50,000. No, euros, under €50,000, please. So what is available for her? Can she buy a property?
Yeah,
against
it was
going
certainly.
past that?
Do you know, it's really funny. I had that question come in a week ago, and I've actually it was for a journalist, and I've actually been looking at homes under 50,000, and there's loads. So if you look on our website and you just put in the price, it will basically bring up the areas where it is affordable. And obviously, you know, if you're looking at the south of France or Nice, you know, forget it. If you're looking at Paris, we actually had a parking space for sale for 51,000. So again, forget Paris. But there are lots of areas where you can. The Limousin, for example, is really good value for money. It's sort of straight down in the centre of France, kind of southwest region, close to Limoges Airport. So there's international flights going in and out from there. And there you can easily get a little cottage for 50,000 euros. I mean, we've even got some properties I was looking at for 23,000 euros. They probably need work, but you know, to spend maybe 20,000 on them to take them up to 50, you'd have exactly what you wanted. And there are some lock up and leave homes in those areas. Côte d'Amour in Brittany. Brittany often has lots of little holiday cottages, you know, little old stone granite buildings, and they're really cute and really lovely, and they literally are easy to rent out because Brittany is such a beautiful coastline. And there are a lot of lock up and leave 50,000s there. The Haute-Vienne, which again is the sort of Poitou-Charentes area, which is the southwest of France. Again, you can get properties there for that value. You know, and I would say after, you know, go onto our website, leggettfrance.com, when you finish the webinar, and, you know, just put in your price race up to 50,000. It will give you all the areas and all the properties that we have at that price, but you certainly can. One of my gardeners, who's quite new here, he's only 23, he's just bought his first home ever for 21,000 euros, and it was livable. It had a shower and everything. It's 21,000. It's in my own village in the Dordogne.
That's brilliant. And as you say, if you're prepared to do a little bit of work, a little bit of renovation, you can really find some bargains out there. And there's another good areas like Mayenne, isn't it? Sort of south of Normandy. There's some, I always think there's some really good value properties around there as well. Lovely sort of rural areas. Yep, lots
and beautifully built, you know, in those sort of, you know, in the sort of western northern parts of France, it's all granite stone and, you know, slate roofs, and they're really big thick walls, so they're not going anywhere. They're never going to fall down, and you know, they literally are you know, under the 50,000 mark, which is great.
You're going to get lots of inquiries for 50,000 euro houses now. Well, that hopefully that's a good answer, Vivian, and enjoy your house hunting. So let's move on for one for Tracy now. This is from Brett Williams, who would like to know about visas and the requirements regarding a French language test. This has been sort of in the news quite a lot recently about the changes or what language.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there has been a lot of news about this. So first of all, visas, of course, there are lots of different visas. The visas is what get you into France. The residency card is what helps you to stay. The visa you're going to apply from I imagine from the UK or from America, you apply from the country of origin, and there's lots of different types of visas. There's the non-working visa that is quite popular for retirees, early retirees, or people who just don't want to work. Best life with no work. I'm all for that. Wonderful. And then of course you've got all the working and business visas and the talent visas. There's lots of different visas, and it really depends on what your project is. And of course that is our job, to help you understand the right visa and understand your project. So reach out with that. When it comes to the language requirements, now it's a big thing over the past few months, and things are changing. First of all, I will say, anybody who's coming on a non-working visa, there is no language test for the moment, and there's no changes happening to that one for the moment. I say the for the moment because we never know what's going to happen in the future. But right now, for people who are not going to be working in France, there's no language test. There is an appointment at the immigration office, of course, but there's no language test. When it comes to the business visa, so any multi-annual visas, so generally speaking, that's working visas. So your entrepreneur visa is a good example, which is a liberal visa. So if you want to be an independent person, so freelancer in France, invoicing your clients worldwide, an entrepreneur visa would be the way to go. And for that one, yes, there is language requirements. you would have to have an equivalent of an A2 level, which is kind of, I would say, low intermediate level. It's kind of the college level in France. So kids of about 11 years old, that level of French. So that changed. So it was A1, it's gone up to A2. And the big difference is that normally what would happen is when you go for your interview, you'll have a test to establish if you have the A2 level, of course. So there's a written and oral test. And of course, the consequence if you don't have the right level is they just ask you to have French lessons between 200 and 600 euros, or 600 lessons or French, which is fabulous. What is going to come is that there will be a test that you have to prove you've reached that level for the renewal stage. So it may be from January 2026 there will be a test, like go through DELF test or something like that. Much like you do for nationality, you have to go through the TCF test to show that you have level B1. There will be a test you have to go to show you've reached A2. Because up until now, all you have to do is say, yes, I'll go through the lessons, but then there's no test at the end to see if you actually reach the A2 level. So the change is going to be the test or some sort of diploma to show you've reached A2 level in order to renew that multi-annual business visa. For the talents one, if you go for a highly qualified talents salaried visa and earn over 53,000 euros, there's no language test. So there are some highly qualified that there's no language test because they consider if you're highly qualified that you already, are adapting to the language situation. I think that's why. So yes, complicated, I know. It shouldn't be a barrier for you to come to France. At the end of the day, we all want to come to live in the country and learn a bit of the language, so don't let it put you off. It just means you need to prepare a little bit in advance if it's going to be in 2026, and of course we can help you with that.
Absolutely, and I think everyone would agree that if you're going to spend any amount of time in France, learning the language is really important to get the most out of it. So Absolutely. It should be something to be embraced, not feared.
Exactly. I mean, how can you sit and have a coffee in the tobacco if you don't understand what people are saying next to you? You have to learn the language anyway.
And I know it's intimidating and it gets harder as you get older, but small steps, every little bit you learn helps. Absolutely. Okie dokie. So thanks, Tracy. We now have an insurance question for Helen. Does French motor insurance work the same as in the UK, or are there differences I should be aware of?
I would say it's largely familiar to most people. I think it's going to be quite important to make sure that you can get insured. A lot of people will be living in the countryside and you don't want to be without your car. France can be a big place to get around. The two main things to be aware of, I think, moving to France are your driving licence and your no claims history. I think that's the important things just to be aware of. Insurance itself is very similar. You have third party fire and theft, fully comprehensive. There's a few subtle differences. Assistance tends to be, which breakdown assistance is wrapped up in the insurance rather than being a standalone facility. And also there are some taxes which are wrapped up in insurance rather than being paid separately. So that just kind of affects the cost. For yourself, preparing to come to France, make sure you're aware of the validity of your driving licence and if you'll need to change that. If you're coming from within Europe, generally you have until your photo card expires to exchange your licence. From the UK, that's the case unless you passed your test from, I think it's January 2021 onwards. And Tracy will correct me if I've got that wrong. And if you're coming from outside of Europe, then be very aware that in some cases you'll be able to exchange your licence, and in some cases you may need to take a French test, and you need to do that within your first year in France. So there's, again, the support and ways and means to do that, but the sooner you can get going with those things, in my opinion, the better. And then no claims history. In France, they have a system of bonus malus. And my just general advice is you can sort all of that out when you get here, talk to professionals who can talk you through it. But the more years of no claims history from your old insurer that you can prove, the better it will be for you when you look at the price of your insurance. There's no limit in France. You can put in as many years as you can prove in documentary evidence. And if you can get 20+ years of no claims, which, you know, many of us do have, then your insurance price will definitely be the better for it.
And just a question, Helen, what sort of documentary evidence is that? How do people prove? Is it a letter from your insurer or what?
Yeah, a letter from the insurer that's saying that, showing that you've been insured, the years you've been insured, details of any claims that you've made, or a clear statement that you've made no claims. And I would also just caution people to make sure that you deal with an insurer who is used to dealing with foreign documents. It can be tempting to go for an online insurer where you can just submit everything without speaking to anybody, and I do understand myself the appeal of that. But the problem with that may be that although you might get an insurance certificate, when your file is studied, they may not be happy to accept documents from outside of France. Whereas if you deal with an insurer where you're dealing with a person who's used to dealing with people in your situation, you know that the policy you've got is going to be spot on.
Great, thanks very much for that advice, Helen.
Thanks.
So question for Sharon now. What documents do I need to provide for a mortgage application? More documentation.
Karen, you will need to provide every single document you have in your filing cabinet. Is a quick answer to that. Reason being, it's French banks don't have access to credit reports. In the UK, we have Experian. In the US, there's Equifax and others, for example. And in France, due to data protection, there is no central database which contains all of your credit history. There is a central database that says if you're interdit bancaire, i.e. you've bounced a check or something like that, but there's no way for the banks to check what other loans, mortgages, and what sort of payer you are. Add to that the fact that France imposes lending criteria on the banks. They have to respect a 35% debt to income ratio. If they go above that, then potentially the banks could be fined for not lending responsibly. So the banks have to build up a full picture of your financial profile, which means they have to dig and analyze every aspect of your finances. So they will ask you to provide obviously your ID, because that's for banking. To open up a bank account, they need to know who they're dealing with. All of your documents regarding your income, sometimes over the last 3 years. If you're self-employed, or if you have a business, or if you have bonuses or variable parts to your income, they need that to ascertain what your taxable income is. Then they will dig into your banking history. Do you go overdrawn? Have you declared all of your loans, etc.? So they will ask you for the last 3 months bank statements for all of your all of the bank accounts that you hold. If you have an account for the nanny, an account for the wife's housekeeping, an account for the kids, an account for your holiday fund, an account for going out at the weekend fund, then they will ask you for all of those bank accounts. They will trace from bank account to see which accounts you have, where the money is going, and to check that you don't have any other loans, because they have a legal obligation to make sure that you respect the debt to income ratio of 35%. So then they will ask you for all of your documents relating to your loans, your mortgage offer, your current mortgage statements, if you have a lease agreement, etc. So they'll ask you for all of those documents as well. Then they have to ask you for your savings, because they have a legal obligation, again, to make sure that your money really is your money, that you've not borrowed it from somewhere else and you're falsely increasing your debt to income ratio, or that it's not money that you've illegally earned. They have to, you know, that with international money laundering and everything, they have to check where the money is coming from. So they will ask you for proof of all of your savings and investments. Depending on your age, they will ask you for what your future retirement income is, because again, how are you going to pay the mortgage once you retire because of the debt to income ratio? So you can see where I'm going with this. It's the paperwork trail. They're going to ask you for every single piece of paperwork that you have. As a broker, we're here to help you understand what sort of documents the banks are going to ask you for at the start of the process, so that you can start preparing, because preparing is everything. If you're moving to France, they're going to ask you what's going to happen to your income prove that your income is going to continue. So yes, you're going to have a lot of patience with regards to paperwork, but then that's getting you used to life in France, because France is all about the bureaucracy and the paperwork. But honestly, I've made it sound absolutely horrendous. It's better to go into things eyes wide open. It's not really that bad once you get started.
And Sharon will hold your hand, so make it a
Or
lot
give you
easier.
the tissues
Yes.
when you cry because it's more documents.
Thanks, Sharon. So tax question for Jake now. My partner and I are buying a home in France, but we're not married. What are the tax implications?
So you could buy it as a joint ownership, which means each partner owns a specified share. Doesn't have to be 50-50, it could be an unequal amount, so 30-70 or whatever. The problem there though is if one partner dies, their share passes on to the heirs. It doesn't automatically go to the partner. So this could mean that the heirs, for example, force a sale of the property, which means it's probably good to have a good relationship with the parents. But unmarried partners, they pay inheritance tax at 60% on an amount above 1,594 euros. So basically, there's no allowance whatsoever. It's a really, really high tax rate. An alternative is to have a property holding company. So what you can do is set up a French property to own the French company to own the property. Each partner owns shares in the company. It's a lot more flexible, especially for things like succession planning, but it's more complex and costly. So you've obviously got to maintain it ongoing. But the benefit you do have is you can write statuses to manage what happens if one partner dies. The other alternative would be to have a civil partnership. So this is recognised for tax inheritance purposes. It's easier and cheaper than a marriage, and it does avoid the 60% inheritance tax. It's also available for non-residents with property in France, or get married and things are simpler, but then still for succession planning, it's not maybe that simple. But that's where, for example, cross-border elements could come to play, because if there are things in the treaties between the country of where you're from and France, there are other things that could be done, but it's not black and white. Depends on the nationality of both you and the partner and the kids. So yeah, it's not necessarily the simplest thing, but those are really the only options that are available.
Okie dokie. So not great news if you're not married, because there's that 60% non-married relation tax. Okay then, thanks Jake. I think we have time for one last question. So Joseph, how can we ensure we get the best exchange rate when we buy our property in France? Do you have a crystal ball?
So I'm going to be quick here because I know we're running out of time, and I didn't bring my crystal ball to work today, I'm afraid, Karen. Maybe next time. From a sort of comparative standpoint, we tend to be able to offer very competitive rates compared to the bank. So just like for like, you can end up saving a lot of money using us compared to the banks. So that's the most straightforward and obvious part. Otherwise, there'd be no need for us. There'd be no gap in the market. But I think what's just as important is the timing. There's been a lot of market movement recently. Mr. Trump in the US has been causing carnage within the financial markets, and in just the last 5 to 6 weeks, we've seen a 4-cent difference on the rate. And I've just used an example of 200,000 euros. If you were buying that property today compared to the middle of April, it's roughly £6,000 cheaper to buy now, because the market has moved in the right direction for you as a buyer. So having us here to help you with the timing is very important. And just lastly, you don't need to wait right up until the moment that the notaire is asking for the funds. With our system, you can purchase the euros whenever you want to, leave them on account waiting for that notaire's instruction, and that way you can control the cost of the future purchase. So timing is just as important as getting a sharp exchange rate, which we can offer. So the earlier you're in touch with us, the better, hence the poll that we set at the beginning of this webinar. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Joseph. So yes, we are now coming to the end of this webinar. But don't worry, there'll be another one next month. It'll be on the 18th of June, and you'll receive details by email all about how to register for that one. And you'll also receive a recording of this webinar, which is really handy if you missed anything or if you want to listen to something again. Sorry if we didn't have time to answer your question, but all our panelists' details will be coming up on the screen. Please do get in touch with them with any questions. They'll all be delighted to help you. And yeah, that's the end of this webinar. So I'll just pass over to all our panelists to say their farewells too. So Joanna? Oh, you're still on mute.
My dog was barking, so I had to put myself on mute very loudly. Yeah, just do get in touch with us. I'm Joanna at leggett.fr. I can't see the details on the screen, so I'm not sure if they are for everybody else, for everyone's details. But yeah, get in touch with us. We're here to help. We can answer any questions by email, personally, or any of our agents. So thanks for tonight and for listening in.
Thank you very much, Joanna. And Tracy?
Yes, so my email is Tracy, Tracy at lbsinfrance.com. Do reach out. I do consider that relocation as a project. It's a very big project. So everyone on this webinar tonight has their own special area and can help you. And the reason from a visa and paperwork perspective works so well is because Joanna and her team, it may take 2 or 3 months to go through the buying process, but it takes 2 or 3 months to go through the visa process. So it works really well hand in hand. Also working with the AXA team to get the private insurance in place. We get the healthcare in place, then we get the top-up healthcare from the insurance. We get Sharon to get the mortgage. Obviously, your Lumen are going to get all your transfer of your money across. And we've got Jake who's going to sort your tax out. So really, you've got everybody on the webinar can help you. So reach out to us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. And Sharon?
Yep, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. I've had a lovely time. I hope you've had a lovely time too. If you would like advice on mortgages, we offer free no obligation consultations. My email address is, the easiest one is international@cafpi, that's CAFPI.fr. Feel free to reach out and see what we can do.
Thanks, Sharon. And Helen?
Hi, thanks, and thanks everybody, and best of luck to everybody listening on their search. If you've got any questions about insurance, health insurance, or the insurances while living in France, you can find us on the internet by googling AXA in France or by emailing agence.international@axa.fr.
Lovely. Thanks, Helen. And Jake?
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. If you're looking for help with pension, investment or tax planning, or any particular questions that weren't answered today, you can just go on our website, which is sjb-global.com, put your details into the contact page, and then one of our qualified advisors will get in touch. And we offer a no obligation review as well. So unless you actually take our advice, there's no fee. So yeah, any question you've got, just get in touch.
Thanks, Jake. And Joseph?
Yeah, thanks, Karen, and to everyone for watching today. We're very easy to get a hold of. If you type in Lumon Pay and call in and ask for me, it's very easy for us to go over some details. And as I said earlier, the sooner you're in touch with us regarding this, the better. It may not be the most fun part or the top of your agenda, but at one point, it will certainly jump to the top of the agenda, and that's why we're here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Joseph. And yes, sorry, there should have been a screen popped up with everybody's contact details on it. We seem to have had a little tech hitch on that, but don't worry, because all the details of everyone will be in the emails you receive. You can get in touch with them anytime. So it just goes for me to say thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Bye, everybody.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.